They say silence is golden, but in my line of work, high-stakes corporate mergers, silence is usually just the sound of a bomb ticking down before it obliterates your career. I was sitting in the aquarium, our glass-walled conference room that smelled of dry erase markers and fear, looking at a spreadsheet that contained the GDP of a small country. This was the culmination of 6 months of my life. 6 months of missed birthdays, cold takeout eaten over a glowing laptop screen at 2 o'clock a.m., and negotiating with a German logistics firm whose idea of a compromise was letting you keep your dignity but taking your soul. This $2B merger was my baby. I had birthed it, nursed it, and was about to send it off to college. I was the merger strategy coordinator, a title that sounds impressive, but essentially means professional janitor for executive egos. I adjusted my glasses, double-checking the EBITDA projections on slide 42, knowing that one decimal point in the wrong place could cost us 8 figures. It's funny how people think corporate life is like the Wolf of Wall Street, all cocaine and chest thumping. Speaking of thumping chests and wild stories, if you want to see how this train wreck unfolds, do me a small favor and hit subscribe and maybe upvote. It helps more than a stiff drink right now, thanks. In reality, it's mostly fluorescent lights and trying not to scream when a man who makes 10 times your salary asks how to convert a PDF. The door to the aquarium swung open, and the air pressure in the room seemed to drop. David, our CEO, walked in. David is the kind of guy who thinks synergy is a verb and wears loafers that cost more than my first car. But he wasn't alone. Trailing behind him, clicking on the hardwood in 4-inch Laubautins, was Lacey. Lacey. She was the VP's daughter, 24 years old. She had a degree in art history from a university that accepts people based on the donation wing of their library, and her LinkedIn bio listed her skills as social media evangelist and vibe curator. She looked like she had just stepped out of a filtered Instagram story, perfect blowout, teeth so white they were a traffic hazard, and an outfit that screamed I'm here to disrupt, mostly because it violated the dress code in 3 different ways. Claudia, good, you're early, David said, flashing that shark-like smile that never reached his eyes. He didn't sit down. That was a bad sign. When they don't sit, they're about to drop a bomb and run. I'm always early, David. The Germans are expecting the preliminary diligence report by noon EST. I'm just finalizing the risk assessment on their Asian supply chain, I said, my voice steady. Prided myself on my voice. It was the voice of a woman who knew where the bodies were buried because she had dug the holes. Right, right. The boring stuff, David waved a hand dismissively. Look, Claudia, we've been thinking, this merger, it's big. It's international. It needs a face. A youthful, dynamic energy to show the market we aren't just a legacy firm. My stomach turned over. It felt like I had swallowed a handful of ice cubes. I wasn't aware we were rebranding, David. I thought we were acquiring a logistics empire. We are, Lacey chimed in. Her voice was high, breathy, the kind of voice that made you want to check if your own ears were popping. But Daddy, I mean David, thinks we need to energize the client side. You know, make it pop, make it pop. I stared at her. She was holding a violently pink iced coffee that was sweating onto the mahogany table. I had spent 3 weeks arguing about amortization schedules with a terrifying Bavarian man named Gunther, and she wanted to make it pop. So, David continued, avoiding my gaze by studying a smudge on the glass wall. We're bringing Lacey on as co-lead for the final phase. She'll handle the client-facing interactions, the dinners, the vibe checks. You'll stay on the back end, obviously, handling the paperwork. Paperwork. He called the structural integrity of a $2 billion deal paperwork. David, I said, carefully placing my pen down. It was a heavy metal pen. I briefly imagined jamming it into the drywall. With all due respect, the lead investor is Arthur Vane. He is 70 years old, notoriously reclusive and hates vibes. He cares about numbers. He cares about competence. Bringing in someone with less experience at this stage is a risk. Lacey laughed. It was a tinkling, condescending sound. Oh, Claudia, you're so intense. Arthur Vane is just a person, right? People by people. I checked his grandniece's TikTok and he totally bought her a pony last year. He has a soft side. We just need to tap into that. I looked at David. He was nodding, entranced by the shiny object he had brought into the room. Lacey's right, Claudia. We need to modernize. You're great at the nuts and bolts. But Lacey, she's the polish. She's the co-lead starting today. Get her up to speed on the deck before the preliminary Zoom call tomorrow. Co-lead, I repeated. The word tasted like ash. Yes, and Claudia? David paused at the door, one hand on the handle, ready to escape the atmosphere of suppressed rage I was generating. Let's try to be a team player. Lacey represents the future of this company. They left. The click-clack of Lacey's heels echoed down the hallway, fading into the hum of the office. Sat there for a long time. The spreadsheet on the screen stared back at me. Columns and rows of logic, order, and truth. And outside that door, a world of nepotism and chaos was gathering to storm the gates. I looked at the cell E14, projected liability. The future of the company, I whispered to the empty room. I didn't scream. I didn't throw my laptop. I didn't cry. Crying ruins your makeup, and unlike Lacey, I didn't have a team of stylists on retainer. Instead, I did what I always do. I saved the file. I closed the laptop, and I started to think if they wanted Lacey to be the face of the deal, fine. I would let her be the face. But they were forgetting one crucial thing about faces. They are the first thing that gets hit when you walk into a wall, and I knew exactly where the walls were. I opened my email and saw the invite for tomorrow's Zoom call. The subject line had already been changed by Lacey. It no longer said Q3 Logistics Merger Preliminary Financials. It now read, "Let's get this bread. Bread Money Intro MTG." I stared at the emoji, a loaf of bread, a flying dollar bill, sent to a German industrial conglomerate and a billionaire investor who allegedly once fired a man for wearing brown shoes after 6 p.m. My hand hovered over the mouse. I could change it back. I could call David and explain why this was professional suicide. I could go to Lacey's office and try to mentor her, to explain that Arthur Vane ate vibes for breakfast and picked his teeth with the bones of socialites. But then I remembered David's voice. The boring stuff, paperwork. I withdrew my hand. I let the subject line stay. "Okay, Lacey," I murmured, picking up my lukewarm black coffee. "Let's get this bread." The war hadn't started with a bang. It started with a bread emoji, and I was about to watch the gluten intolerance of the century kick in. The next morning, the aquarium felt less like a conference room and more like a gladiatorial arena where the lions were starving and the gladiator was armed with a selfie stick. We were 5 minutes out from the Zoom call. I was wearing my charcoal structured blazer, tailored, severe, professional. Lacey was wearing something that looked like a neon green cropped straitjacket. Okay, so Lacey was adjusting her ring light, which she had clamped onto the top of the boardroom monitor. When they log on, should I lead with a joke? Icebreakers are huge right now. Maybe something about how German sounds like angry gargling? No, too aggressive. Maybe just a classic Guten Tag, y'all? Lacey, I said, my voice devoid of emotion. These are representatives from Vane Capital and the Mueller Group. They don't want icebreakers. They want to know why the operating expenses in the Munich plant increased by 4% in Q2. Lacey rolled her eyes, checking her reflection in the darkened screen. "You worry too much, Claudia." David said to bring energy. "I'm bringing energy." The screen flickered to life. The pixels arranged themselves into the terrifyingly high-definition faces of the Mueller team. There sat Gunther, looking like a granite statue that had recently learned to frown, and two of Arthur Vane's senior analysts, who looked like they were bred in a laboratory for the sole purpose of finding tax loopholes. "Good afternoon," Gunther said. His voice sounded like a heavy door closing in a mausoleum. "We are ready to proceed with the financial alignment." Everyone. Lacey waved at the camera with both hands. "I'm Lacey. I'm the new co-lead for the vibe of this whole thing. Can we just say how excited we are to be merging with you guys? It's going to be literally iconic." Silence. Absolute vacuum-sealed silence. On the screen, one of Vane's analysts adjusted his glasses. Gunther didn't blink. Iconic, Gunther repeated, tasting the word like it was spoiled milk. "Frau Lacey, we are here to discuss the EBITDA adjustments." "Right, the abadabba stuff." Lacey laughed nervously. She looked at me, panic flaring behind her eyes for a millisecond before she plastered the smile back on. "Claudia, pull up the deck." I shared my screen. The spreadsheet appeared, clean, precise, beautiful. "Okay," Lacey said, squinting at the numbers. "So, as you can see here, the money coming in is good. We have a lot of synergistic velocity happening in the green columns." Synergistic velocity. I physically felt a blood vessel in my eye twitch. "Excuse me," the Vane analyst interrupted. "What is the basis for the projected 12% reduction in overhead?" Footnotes indicate a reliance on automated logistics, but the union contracts prohibit automation for another 3 years. Lacey froze. She looked at me. "Claudia, you want to jump in on the boring deets?" I unmuted. "The 12% is contingent on the expiration of the Clause 4B contracts in the Hamburg facility, which occurs in 18 months. We've factored in a bridge loan to cover the interim gap, offset by the liquidation of the redundant fleet assets." The analyst nodded, acceptable. Lacey let out a breathy laugh. "See, boring deets. Claudia is great at the math stuff. She's like a human calculator, right? But let's talk big picture. What's the culture fit? I was thinking for the signing ceremony, we could do a custom hashtag. Hashmuller Merger Mania? Thoughts?" Gunther looked like he was about to have a stroke. "We do not require a hashtag, Frau Lacey. We require competence." The air in the room turned 0 Kelvin. Lacey flushed a deep, blotchy red. She had lost the room, she knew it. David was in the corner, looking at his phone, refusing to make eye contact with the train wreck he had orchestrated. Lacey needed a win. She needed to reassert dominance. And like a cornered animal, she lashed out at the nearest threat, me. She turned to me, laughing a little too loud. "God, Gunther is so serious. You guys would get along great. I mean, look at you, Claudia. You're practically German yourself." She gestured up and down at my charcoal blazer. "Do you even own a suit that isn't depressing? I mean, seriously, do you even own a suit that doesn't make you look like you're going to a funeral for a librarian?" She looked back at the screen, expecting the men to join in the locker room banter. "I mean, we need to spice it up if we're going to be partners, right? Claudia here is strictly business casual circa 2004. Nobody laughed, the silence stretched. It was thick and suffocating. On the screen, the vain analyst was staring directly at Lacey with an expression of mild anthropological horror. I felt the heat rise up my neck. It wasn't embarrassment. I wasn't embarrassed by my clothes. My clothes were Armani, they were armor. I was embarrassed for her. I was embarrassed for my company. Lacey, I said softly. The funeral suit is St. John, and we are on slide 12. Whatever. Lacey scoffed, flipping her hair. Let's just move on. This slide is boring anyway. David finally looked up. Lacey, let's keep it focused. I am focused, she snapped, her voice cracking. I'm trying to build a relationship here. I looked at the camera lens. I saw the vain analyst make a note on a pad of paper. He didn't look at the screen. He just wrote something down, underlined it twice, and then looked back up. His eyes met mine through the digital void. There was a flicker of something there. Recognition? Pity? No, it was simpler than that. It was the look of a man realizing there was only one adult in the room. I leaned back in my chair. The humiliation was supposed to break me. Lacey wanted me to snap to get defensive to prove I was fun. Instead, I went completely still. Do I own a suit? I thought, oh, Lacey, you have no idea what I own. I own the data. I own the history. And as of this moment, I own the silence. Didn't say another word for the rest of the call. When Lacey floundered on the currency exchange rates, I drank my water. When she promised a delivery timeline that was physically impossible, I took notes. The bridge was burning. And I decided, right then and there, that I wasn't going to be the one holding the hose. In the corporate world, there is a distinct difference between quiet quitting and what I was doing. Quiet quitting is passive. It's doing the bare minimum to not get fired. What I was engaging in was strategic withdrawal. It's the act of removing the load-bearing walls of a building you designed, stepping outside, and waiting for gravity to do its job. For the next 2 weeks, the office became a theater of the absurd. Lacey, emboldened by David's refusal to reprimand her, turned the merger prep into a sorority rush week. She ordered custom cupcakes with the Vane Capital logo on them, which arrived looking like gray blobs. She scheduled brainstorming sessions that were just her reading motivational quotes from Pinterest. I attended every meeting. I arrived 5 minutes early. I sat in the same chair, and I contributed exactly nothing beyond what was explicitly asked of me. Claudia, what do you think about this font? Lacey would ask. It is legible, I would reply. Claudia, should we invite the client to a mixology class? That is a decision for the co-lead. I stopped correcting her grammar in emails. I stopped reminding her of time zone differences. When she scheduled a call with the Tokyo team for 3 a.m. their time, I simply accepted the invite and waited for the angry emails to roll in. David noticed the silence. He stopped by my desk on a Tuesday looking harried. His tie was crooked. Claudia, you're quiet lately. Everything okay with the prep? Lacey says you're being distant. I'm just letting her lead, David. Like you asked, I'm handling the back end. Right, good, good. He shifted his weight. She's doing great, right? A few growing pains, but the client seems engaged. They are certainly paying attention, I said. It wasn't a lie. Watching a car crash is a form of engagement. While Lacey was busy picking out playlist songs for the closing dinner, I was operating on a different frequency. My laptop screen was angled away from the door, and my personal email was open. I had spent 6 months building a rapport with Arthur Vane's executive assistant, a woman named Alina. Alina was 60, British, and terrifying. We had bonded over a shared hatred of reply all chains and an appreciation for forensic accounting. Subject, regarding the Q3 projections to Alina Rigby at Vane Capcom. Dear Alina, I hope the weather in London is tolerable. Please find attached the updated risk assessment models you requested. Note that these figures differ from the ones circulating in the official slide deck. I believe in accuracy over optimism. Best, Claudia. The reply came 3 minutes later. Dear Claudia, Mr. Vane has reviewed the attachment. He notes the discrepancy in the liquidity ratios. He asked me to convey that he values sanity in an asylum. We are looking forward to the final strategy session. He will be attending personally. He also asks if the co-lead is still insisting on the bread emoji. Regards, E. I allowed myself a microscopic smile. Sanity in an asylum. That was the validation, they knew. The investors weren't stupid. People like Arthur Vane didn't become billionaires by falling for vibes. They were watching the show, but they were reading my subtitles. Lacey walked by my glass wall, talking loudly on her phone. No, tell the caterer we need vegan options for the Germans. Do Germans eat vegan? Whatever, just get pretzels. She tapped on my glass with a manicured nail, winked, and kept walking. I looked at the sent folder on my screen. I wasn't just working for the company anymore. I was working for the deal, and the deal had nothing to do with David or Lacey. It had a life of its own. The withdrawal was complete. I had removed myself from the blast radius. Now, all that was left was to wait for someone to light the fuse. And as it turned out, Lacey brought her own matches. The fumble happened on a Thursday, 3 days before the final strategy session. We were in a prep meeting, reviewing the synergy forecast. This is the part of the merger where you explain to the investors how 1 plus 1 is going to equal 3. It's usually a delicate balance of optimistic math and strategic cost-cutting. Lacey had taken over the spreadsheet. Okay, so I tweaked the numbers last night, she announced, projecting her laptop onto the big screen. The previous forecast was just too conservative. It looked sad, so I pumped up the cross-selling projections. I looked at the screen and felt my blood run cold. Lacey, I said, leaning forward, you doubled the earnout potential. Based on what? Based on the vibe, she said, throwing her hands up. If we believe in the product, the customers will believe. It's the law of attraction. I watched a documentary on it. Law of attraction is not a GOP-approved accounting principle, I said, my voice tight. You are promising a 20% growth rate in a market that is currently contracting by 5%. If we put this in the final deck, it's not just optimism, it's fraud. David looked up from his phone. The word fraud usually gets a CEO's attention. Whoa, Claudia, that's a heavy word. Lacey, explain your thinking. I just think we need to show confidence. Lacey whined. Claudia is trying to sabotage the energy. She wants us to go in there and say, oh, we might make a little money. No, we are going to crush it. And if we miss the targets later, we'll just pivot. That's what startups do. We are not a startup, I said. We are a publicly traded company. And if you present these numbers to Arthur Vane, he will shred you. He knows the market cap better than you know your horoscope. David, Lacey looked at her father's friend with pleading eyes. She's doing it again. She's being a hater. David sighed. He looked tired. He looked like a man who had made a bad bet and was doubling down because he was too proud to fold. Claudia, let's meet in the middle. Lacey, maybe tone it down by 5%. Claudia, stop being so rigid. We need to sell the dream. Selling a dream is fine, David. Selling a lie is actionable, I said. Just fix the font, Claudia, David snapped. It was the first time he had raised his voice at me in 5 years. Let Lacey handle the strategy. You handle the formatting. I went silent. The room seemed to stretch and warp. Handle the formatting. Understood, I said. I went back to my desk. I opened the master file. I didn't change Lacey's numbers. I left them exactly as she wanted them. The 20% growth, the magical synergy, the law of attraction economics. Then I opened a separate file. Merger Strategy Final Real PDF. This document contained the actual market analysis, the conservative growth models, the risk mitigation for the contracting market, the truth. I attached it to a new email to a leaner. Subject, supplemental reading for Mr. Vane body. Please ensure Mr. Vane has this for the meeting. It contains the data that supports the boring reality. The official presentation will differ significantly. Consider this the director's cut. I hit. My hand didn't shake, my heart didn't race. I felt a strange, icy calm. They wanted me to handle the formatting? Fine. I had formatted the truth and delivered it to the only person who mattered. I looked over the partition. Lacey was high-fiving David in the hallway. They were celebrating their vision. Great session, Lace, David was saying. You really held your ground. Thanks. Claudia is just so old school, Lacey giggled. She doesn't get it. I took a sip of my lukewarm water. Oh, I got it. I got it better than anyone. I was just the only one who knew that the vision was a hallucination, and the ground they were holding was a trapdoor. Friday afternoon brought the news that hit the office like a drone strike. Eliner sent the confirmation email. Arthur Vane would be attending the strategy session in person, not via Zoom, not sending a proxy. The billionaire himself was flying his Gulfstream into Teterboro and taking a car to our office. Panic is a smell. It smells like dry cleaning chemicals and nervous sweat. The office reeked of it. David was pacing in his office, barking orders at his assistant to order better coffee, to get the windows cleaned, to hide the interns. Lacey, however, was in a state of manic delusion. He's coming to see me, she told anyone who would listen in the break room. Probably heard about the vibe shift. He wants to be part of the new energy. She spent the afternoon practicing her lines in the glass conference room. It was painful to watch. She was treating a multi-billion-dollar merger negotiation like an audition for a reality TV show. So Arthur, can I call you Artie? The synergy here is basically explosive, she rehearsed to an empty chair. She checked her notes. Reverse vesting. Yes, we are reverse vesting the assets. I sat at my desk 20 feet away listening. Reverse vesting the assets. That meant absolutely nothing. It was word salad. I wasn't panicking. I was preparing. I had my director's cut presentation, but I knew Arthur Vane. He was old school. He liked paper. He liked to hold the numbers in his hand to feel the weight of the logic. At 7:00 p.m., the office was mostly empty. Lacey had left to get a pre-game facial. David was still in his office, probably drinking scotch. My phone buzzed, a text from an unknown number. Courier is downstairs, blue sedan, ask for the package for a. I grabbed my purse and walked to the elevator. My heart gave a single, hard thump against my ribs. This was the point of no return. Down in the parking garage, the air was cold and damp. The blue sedan was idling in the corner. I walked over. The driver rolled down the window. He didn't look like a courier. He looked like private security. ID, he asked. I showed him my badge. For a, he asked. For a, I confirmed. I handed him a thick manila envelope. Inside was the printed copy of the real strategy. No logos, no fluff, just the raw data I had compiled, bound in simple black plastic. He asked for a physical copy, the driver said, taking the envelope. He doesn't trust screens, says they lie. He's right, I said. The window rolled up. The sedan glided away into the night. I stood there in the concrete silence of the garage. I had just handed confidential company data to a third party. Technically, it was corporate espionage. Technically, I could be sued into oblivion, but morally, I was saving the deal. I was saving the employees who would be laid off when Lacey's synergy failed to materialize. I was saving the legacy of the work I had done. I went back upstairs. David was leaving his office. He looked haggard. "You're still here, Claudia?" he asked. Surprised, "Just tidying up some loose ends," I said. "Good. Look, about tomorrow, Lacey is nervous. Just be there for her, okay? If she stumbles, catch her, but let her shine." "I'll be right there, David," I promised. He nodded, looking relieved. "I knew I could count on you. You're a soldier, Claudia." I watched the elevator doors close on him. "No, David," I whispered. "I'm not a soldier. I'm the sniper." I walked into the conference room one last time. I looked at Lacey's notes left on the table. Smile, make eye contact, use the word disrupt. I picked up a marker and wrote on the whiteboard in small letters in the bottom corner where no one would look until it was too late. V equals P1 plus Rn, the formula for compound interest. Small investments over time yield massive results. My silence was the investment. Tomorrow was the payout. The night before the merger meeting, David insisted on a team alignment dinner. He chose a steakhouse that was dimly lit, overpriced, and loud, the kind of place where business is discussed in hushed tones over $200 Cabernets. It was just David and me. Lacey had declined. She claimed she needed beauty sleep to be camera ready for Arthur Vane. David poured me a glass of wine. To the big day, he toasted. His hand was shaking slightly. To the merger, I replied, taking a sip. "Was excellent wine. I plan to enjoy it." "Claudia," David started, leaning in. "I know this transition hasn't been easiest for you. I know you did the heavy lifting." 6 months of it, I reminded him gently. "Exactly, and I appreciate that, but you have to understand the optics. Lacey, she connects with the younger demographic. The market is changing. We can't just be suits and spreadsheets anymore." "Arthur Vane is 70, I said, cutting into my steak. "Isn't a younger demographic. He's a shark. He's an old man with a checkbook," David dismissed. "Lacey will charm him. She has that sparkle. But look, if she gets stuck on the numbers, I need you to step in, seamlessly. Don't make her look bad, just slide the answer to her, or speak up and say what Lacey means to say is, you know the drill." He was asking me to be the ventriloquist and Lacey the dummy. He wanted me to do the work, give her the credit, and clean up the mess, all while remaining invisible. "You want me to support her," I stated. "I want you to support the company," David corrected. "We need this deal. If this falls through, the stock tanks. Your options, my options, they all go to zero. So can I count on you to be the safety net?" I looked at him. I had worked for this man for 10 years. I had fixed his mistakes, covered his absences, and made him look like a genius in board meetings. And his reward was to replace me with a TikTok influencer and ask me to hold the bucket while she threw up on the balance sheet. "Of course, David," I smiled. It was my best smile. The one I used when I was firing consultants. "I will do exactly what is best for the merger." "Great," he exhaled, visibly relaxing. "I knew you were a team player. You're the bedrock, Claudia. The bedrock is buried. Bedrock gets walked on. Bedrock is also the only thing that stands firm when the earthquake hits." "I won't let the deal fail," I added. He didn't hear the specific phrasing. He heard what he wanted to hear. The next morning, I arrived at the office with nothing but a single, slim leather folder. No laptop, no charger, no stack of binders. Lacey was already there, surrounded by a whirlwind of paper. She looked manic. "Claudia, where's your computer?" "I can't find the slide with the thing." "Ebit to bridge." "I don't need my computer," I said calmly, taking my seat at the far end of the table. "You have the deck, Lacey. You're the co-lead. But what if I need you to pull something up?" "You said you wanted to drive," I said, opening my folder. Inside was a single blank notepad and a pen, so drive. David walked in, clapping his hands. "Okay, team, game time. Mr. Vane is in the lobby. Everyone looks sharp." "Lacey, you got this?" Yes, I got this." She pumped a fist, but her eyes were terrified. I sat back. The door opened. The air pressure dropped again. Arthur Vane walked in. He was shorter than I expected, wearing a suit that cost more than my house but looked like it was 20 years old. He didn't smile. He didn't shake hands. He walked to the head of the table, sat down, and placed a black plastic-bound document on the mahogany surface. My document. He looked around the room, his eyes scanning faces like a barcode reader. He stopped on Lacey. He stared for a full 3 seconds, then he looked at David. Finally, his eyes landed on me. He didn't nod, he just blinked. "Begin," Arthur Vane said. Lacey stood up, her hands trembling. She clicked the clicker. The first slide appeared, the one with the bread emoji. Arthur Vane stared at the emoji. He took a slow, deep breath. I uncapped my pen. Lacey cleared her throat. It sounded like a dry twig snapping in a quiet forest. "Hi, hello, welcome, Mr. Vane, sir." "Artie?" "No, Mr. Vane," she stammered. She looked at the screen, then at the billionaire stone-faced at the end of the table. "We are so pumped to be here. This merger is it's going to be a total game changer. Like disrupting the paradigm." Arthur Vane didn't move. He sat with his hands folded over the black document I had sent him. He looked like a judge waiting for a confession. So Lacey clicked to the next slide. It was the synergy forecast, the one with the fraudulent numbers. "As you can see, we're projecting massive growth." Because you know, when two companies love each other very much, she laughed nervously. Just kidding. But seriously, the vibe between our logistics teams is electric. We think the supply chain just needs a little lipstick. You know, make it sexy. The silence in the room was so heavy it felt like physical pressure. David was staring at the table, his face a mask of frozen horror. Lipstick, Arthur Vane repeated. His voice was gravel and old money. You intend to put lipstick on a shipping container supply chain? Metaphorically, Lacey squeaked. I mean, we want to improve the look, the feel, the brand identity. I see, Vane said. He opened the black folder in front of him. And how does lipstick account for the 15% tariff increase on the Asian routes detailed in page 4 of the actual data? Lacey froze. She looked at the screen. The slide she was showing didn't have any tariff data. It just had a graph that went up and to the right, labeled Awesome Growth. Lacey said. Sweat was beading on her forehead. Well, the tariffs are negotiable. We feel like we can vibe check the customs officers. David made a noise that sounded like a whimper. Vibe check the customs officers, Vane said flatly. He closed the folder. Young lady, do you know what the net operating loss carry forward is for the target entity? Lacey looked at me. Her eyes were wide, desperate, pleading. This was the moment, the safety net moment. Help me, save me. I think my colleague Claudia has the boring details on that, Lacey said, forcing a smirk, trying to regain her cool girl composure. Claudia loves the dusty stuff. Claudia? She gestured to me like I was a prop. I sat there. I didn't look at Lacey. I looked directly at Arthur Vane. I didn't reach for a laptop. I didn't scramble for papers. The net operating loss carry forward is $42.5 million, I said. My voice was calm, clear, and projected to the back of the room. However, due to the Section 382 limitation, it can only utilize approximately $3.1 million annually. This extends the tax benefit realization period to 14 years, which impacts the NPV of the deal by roughly 8%. Lacey blinked. David's head snapped up. Furthermore, I continued, not breaking eye contact with Vane, regarding the tariffs you mentioned. The 15% increase is mitigated by the supplier contracts in Vietnam, which I renegotiated 3 months ago to include a duty-sharing clause. That saves us $12 million annually, effectively neutralizing the tariff impact. I recited the numbers from memory. No notes, no slides, just facts. And as for the lipstick, I added, allowing a fraction of dryness into my tone, we aren't rebranding the containers. We are optimizing the cubic utilization rates. We don't need them to look sexy. We need them to be full. Arthur Vane stared at me. For the first time, the corner of his mouth twitched. And the earning projections? He asked, tapping the black folder. This document says 4% growth. The screen says 20%. The screen, I said, glancing briefly at Lacey's neon nightmare, is a theoretical best-case scenario based on unverified optimism. The document in front of you is the mathematical reality based on market conditions. Lacey made a sound like a deflating balloon. But the law of attraction, she whispered. Mathematics does not care about your attraction, Vane snapped, not looking at her. He kept his eyes on me. Go on, tell me about the debt covenants, and I did. For 20 minutes I conducted a symphony of finance. I walked him through the debt structure, the amortization, the labor unions, and the integration timeline. I didn't stutter. I didn't use buzzwords. I spoke the language of money, and Arthur Vane was listening. Lacey stood there, clicker in hand, slowly fading out of existence. She was a ghost in her own meeting. David was pale, realizing that I wasn't saving Lacey. I was burying her, and I was doing it with the shovel he had handed me. When I finished speaking, the room was silent again. But this time, it wasn't the awkward silence of failure. It was the respectful silence of a courtroom after a verdict has been read. Arthur Vane sat back in his chair. He took off his glasses and cleaned them with a silk handkerchief. He looked at the screen where Lacey's "Let's get this bread" slide was still glowing mockingly. Then he looked at David. David, Vane said softly. Yes, Arthur? David's voice was an octave higher than usual. You have wasted my time. David flinched. Arthur, I assure you Lacey is she's learning the ropes, she has a fresh perspective. Vane stood up. The chair scraped loudly against the floor. I do not pay billions of dollars for fresh perspectives on how to bankrupt a company. I pay for competence. He pointed a finger at Lacey. It was a gnarled, terrifying finger. Get her out of here. She is a liability. If I see her on this deal again, I am pulling the capital. Immediately, Lacey gasped. Tears welled up in her eyes. But my vibe out, Vane barked. Lacey looked at David. David looked at the floor. She let out a sob, grabbed her purse, and ran out of the room. The click-clack of her heels was erratic, stumbling. Vane turned to me. The harshness in his face softened just a fraction. You, he said. I stood up. Yes, Mr. Vane, you sent the package? I did. Risky move, he said. Could have been fired. Better to be fired for competence than retained for fraud, I replied. He actually smiled then. It was a dry, rusty thing, but it was there. I only deal with her. He said to David, pointing a thumb at me, her or nothing. If she isn't the lead on this, the sole lead, the deal is dead. Do you understand? David looked like he had been slapped with a wet fish. He looked at me, seeing me for the first time in years, not as the furniture. not as the bedrock, but as the boss. Yes, Arthur, of course. Claudia is she's the lead, absolutely. Vane buttoned his jacket. Good, we finish this tomorrow. Claudia, bring the real deck. Leave the emojis at home. Understood, I said. Vane walked to the door. He paused and looked back at me. He looked at my charcoal blazer. Nice suit, he said, professional. Then he walked out. The door closed. David and I were alone in the aquarium. The fan of the projector hummed overhead. David slumped into his chair. He put his head in his hands. Jesus, Claudia, you really went behind my back? I went in front of you, David, I said, gathering my single folder. You just weren't looking. I could fire you, he mumbled into his hands. But there was no heat in it, he knew. He knew I held the keys to the kingdom now. You could, I agreed. But then who would explain the Section 382 limitation to Arthur Vane? David lifted his head. He looked old, defeated. Lacey is going to be devastated. Lacey is going to be fine, I said. She has her vibes. I have work to do. I walked to the door. I didn't slam it. Didn't need to. The quiet click of the latch was the loudest sound in the world. 1 week later, the office was different. The vibe had shifted, but not in the way Lacey had predicted. It was quieter, sharper. Lacey had been reassigned to a satellite office in Florida to spearhead brand activation, which is corporate code for go away and play on Instagram where you can't hurt the P and L. Her desk was cleared out. The pink coffee stains were scrubbed from the mahogany table. I sat in the aquarium. The glass walls didn't feel like a cage anymore. They felt like a cockpit. David had announced my promotion on Monday, VP of Strategic Mergers, a corner office, and a significant equity bump. He hadn't looked me in the eye when he did it, but he signed the papers. That was all that mattered. A courier arrived around 10 o'clock a.m., a small, heavy package for me. I opened it. Inside was a bottle of vintage scotch, older than Lacey, and a handwritten note on thick, cream-colored cardstock. Claudia, thank you for not playing games. We trust you. The deal closes Friday. A Vane P.S. Aliner says hello. I smiled. I put the note in my drawer, right next to the Let's Get This Bread slide that I had printed out and kept as a memento. A reminder of what happens when you mistake confidence for competence. Later that afternoon, the HR director stopped by. Claudia, just checking in. We have some new interns starting next week. David wanted to know if you wanted to mentor one. Maybe someone with fresh energy? I looked at her over the rim of my glasses. No, I said, send me the one who knows how to use Excel, and tell them if they use an emoji in a subject line, they're fired. Right, got it, she stammered and retreated. I turned back to my screen. The spreadsheet was open. The numbers were black and orderly. The chaos was gone. People think revenge is screaming. They think it's slashing tires or leaking photos. But in my world, revenge is success. Revenge is being the person they can't afford to lose. Revenge is sitting in a room full of people who doubted you and watching them realize that you are the only thing keeping the roof from collapsing on their heads. I took a sip of my coffee. Black, no sugar. I adjusted my blazer. It was a new one, St. John, sharp enough to cut glass. Do I own a suit? I whispered to the empty office, a ghost of a smile playing on my lips. Honey, I don't just own the suit. I own the strategy. I own the room. And now, I hit the enter key on the final merger document. I own the deal.